Hi, I'm Sophie Page, and today in this sugar flowers tutorial we're going to be making the Gerbera. So the Gerbera is a great flower if you're new to sugarcraft. It is quite straightforward to make, however I think you'll agree it's a quite impressive flower. It looks like you've been making sugar flowers for quite a while, I think. So I'm going to start by colouring my flour paste, which is known as gum paste to some people, but in the UK we call it flour paste. So I use Renshaw, and you can make your own much quicker, easier to buy it. So I'm going to take a small amount here, and with gum paste, flour paste, we always have to work it a little bit to start with, as it can come out quite hard. So we'll cover it. I'm just popping it in a bag over there to keep it from drying out. So we give it a little knead, and we always work a little bit of Trex into it. So I'm just going to get a little bit of Trex. I'll put it on my board, or you put it on your work surface, whatever you're using it on, and a little bit on my fingers. And we're just going to give it a little knead. So we've got our flour paste kneaded, and now we're going to add some colour. I like to use the Sugar Flare colours, and they're nice and strong without using too much. So I just use a cocktail stick because they're disposable, of course. Let's put a little bit on. I'm going to mix two colours, so I'm using the tangerine and just a little bit of egg yellow as well, and then knead it in. So our colour is all now nice and evenly kneaded in, and I've created a nice vivid orange to start off with. So we're going to press it down rather, so that we don't have to roll out quite so much. And now we're going to roll it really thinly. If you've got a pasta machine, it's definitely great to use that at this point instead, but we're going to do it the manual way and just roll. It is quite sticky, so we don't want it to stick to our surface, so we're going to keep moving it around. We're not going to flip it over, we're just going to turn it a quarter each time. If you feel it's beginning to stick to your surface, just put a little bit of Trex underneath. So we've rolled our paste nice and thin now. With sugar flowers, the thinner you can roll it, generally the better. Some flowers require slightly thicker petals, but they look more delicate and pretty with a thinner paste. I'm now going to use my large Gerbera cutter, or sometimes it's known as a daisy cutter, and we're just going to place it over, make sure we've got room on all sides, press it down very firmly, and you want to give it a bit of a wiggle just to make sure I can feel now that it's cut through. So I've made my cut, but before I flip it over and take it out the press, I'm just going to bag up this excess flour paste. Flour paste is quite expensive and it dries out very quickly, so we don't want this to go to waste. So I turn my flour cutter over, and particularly with this cutter, there's often quite a rough edge, like a feathery edge all the way around, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to run my finger quickly over to get rid of any excess there. And then we're going to flip it back over and press it out. So now we've got our flower shape ready, we're going to place it onto our foam mat, ready for giving a little bit of life into it. And now using our ball tool, well, we want a small ball tool, so we've got a large end and a medium end, and we're going to want the smaller end of the two. We're just simply going to work on each petal at a time and roll from the outside to the in. We're going to do that all the way around, and it just creates a nice little shape to the petals, makes it much more realistic. Once we're done here, worked our way all the way around, we're going to transfer it to one of these flower formers. We're going to flip it over and just place it in. So we're keeping that nice cupped shape we've just created. And next up we're going to be making little cuts, if you can see here, little cuts in the tip of each petal all the way around again. And repeat the process exactly with another two petal sets. So this is my last set of petals that I'm just finishing there. We're now going to set these aside to firm up, and I'm going to leave it for 30 to 40 minutes, that depends on the humidity in your working environment. So when your petal sets have just about firmed up, we're going to take another piece of flower paste and we're going to roll this piece out very thinly again. Next we're going to take our small daisy cutters. So this one's small, but this one's tiny and we want the really tiny one. So when we make our cut, we want to give it a little rub on the surface and a wipe over with our finger again. Just make sure there's no excess. We're going to press that out and we're going to repeat this 7 times in total. So I've made my 7 little petals here. We're going to go each petal in turn and we're going to make a slit in the centre of that petal. So you may need to hold it firm if it starts to wiggle away. When we've cut every petal, we're just going to cut the whole thing in half. Our petals are now firmed up enough to assemble, so we're going to be placing one on top of the other, or in case of 3, just stack them up. So I'm going to take a little bit of my sugar glue on my paintbrush, don't need much, and just in the centre of this one, well either one, just apply. We're going to take our other set, which might be slightly more firmed up than my one is, and we're going to place it on top so that the petals are in between the other petals, just to give it a bit more life and dimension. We're going to make our feathery centre now, which is this part. We're going to glue, don't need loads of glue, but glue a circle. We're going to pick up one at a time and just place it on. Now it's a good idea to use your ball tool just to press in that centre, and this lifts it up slightly. Each one is going to slightly overlap the next one, but we're not being too precise. So you might need a little bit more glue just to dab in as we go round again with our second set. We're now going to finish our centres by taking a small piece of flower paste, about the size of a garden pea. We're going to roll it into a really tight ball, so lots of pressure, so we don't get any cracks. So about that size. Place it on your work surface and just flatten it out to make a round. Don't have to be exact. We're going to need a small amount of glue in this centre gap here, and then we're going to place that in. Might need a bit of manipulation, so just pop it in there, and you can use a tool if you want. Just make sure it's in that centre nice and firm and it's not standing up too proud. And then with my small sharp scissors, I'm going to make little snips all over. So I don't want them all to be uniform and I don't want them to be too peaky. So I'm just going to keep rotating it until the whole thing is covered. So when we think we've finished and we've snipped all over, we're just going to take our finger and just ever so slightly press it down to flatten just that centre. Careful not to flatten these outer bits. And that's complete. So next is the really fun part. It's my favourite part because it really brings the flower to life. We're going to be dusting. So I'm going to start with the centre. I'm going to need a couple of brushes because they get quite grubby, and we're going to use these petal dusts. I'm going to use chocolate for the centre mixed with a little bit of tangerine. So I'll be putting a little bit of petal dust in each pot, and so that makes it easier to mix them. So when we do the centre, we're going to be using a stippling technique. So I'm going to be just sort of pressing down lightly. We'll do that until it's covered. And then when we move on to the next bit, we're going to change our brush because that's got the dark colour on now. Now I'm going to mix my highlight colour. So I'm using a little bit of primrose or a brighter yellow and a bit of apricot to dull it down. So I'm going to mix them together. And I'm just going to go over the tips and maybe along the edge a little bit. Just on each petal. We're just adding layers of colour really. Now we're going to finish up with our feathery centre bit. I'm going to use just a slightly darker tone of orange and red mixture here, and we're just going to stipple that on again. I'm working, if you noticed, on a bit of kitchen roll because it does get quite messy, the dusting. You can end up inhaling quite a lot of it as well, so you can wear a mask if you want. the last thing to note was that when we finish the dusting, which I have now, to set the colour and to give it a bit of a lifelike shine, we steam it. So if I was using a flower on a wire, I would hold it over the kettle, boiling kettle, just enough that it looks moist, but not enough that it flops. And if I was using a flower like this that doesn't have anything for me hold, a wire to hold onto, then I'd use a handheld steamer. And that is our completed Gerbera.